Hey, welcome along everyone. It's great to see such a good turnout actually in Auckland in what we hope will be a regular occurrence in terms of a procurement knowledge app. We expect to do at least 3 of these next year, and what we're trying to do is to replicate some of the information that we do provide in Wellington and making sure we get up to Auckland to be able to share some of the news up there. Now, if you're not aware, by the look of the camera and that sitting behind you, we are going to film the session and we'll load it up on our learning management system at MB, or in New Zealand Government Procurement Property, Hikina, which, if you haven't heard about, is something well worth registering for. You do need a RealMe login, but once you're logged in, it gives you access to all the sessions that we run in Wellington or wherever around the country that actually talks about the work that we're doing and topics of interest and things like that. So a really good source of lots of collateral, lots of video around presentations, so that you're actually, if you can't be there, you still get a chance to see it. Now today is a really good example, I guess, of the broader outcomes from government procurement that we're trying to achieve for all New Zealanders, and trying to do it in a different way. You know, it's not about an individual agency actually trying to do everything themselves. It's about a system actually working together to be able to provide broader benefits. And today we've got 2 speakers. We've got Jazz Singh from the Council, with Tara McMillan from NZTA, who, big call out, who are going to talk about some of the broader outcomes and a framework that's being established that have involved a lot of different agencies. So it's not just something that MB's driving from the centre, but how do we actually implement some of this stuff in a social procurement or sustainable procurement way. As I've gone around the country talking about this to different audiences, whether they be agencies or suppliers, we've found people really receptive to it, because they're things that actually are really quite easy to understand why we do it. It's about trying to make it better for New Zealanders, and using government procurement as a mechanism through secondary procurement to actually get some broader outcomes, some better benefit in that. And most people would say, yeah, it's just the right thing to do. So we haven't had pushback. We are going to be measuring and monitoring what actually comes out of some of these initiatives. That's not so much to try and create a whole bunch of extra work, it's to understand what is being done, what is being achieved, and how we can tweak things and move things so that things don't become just bureaucratic, but they are actually adding value. 2 key things that I'm pushing as I go around the place. One is broader outcomes is about, in part, resetting the authorising environment as well. Really important as we go, as we do this and try and implement broader outcomes in our agencies, that we reset the authorising environment to allow the art of the possible. That means quite often actually having discussions very early in the planning piece to make sure that all the planning and thinking that goes into a procurement activity is set up in such a way that broader outcomes can happen. It's about making sure that people actually authorise it up front and not balk at the other end when suddenly it might be a bit more expensive or a change in financial model that's got to achieve it. And it's also making sure that leadership actually get involved, because otherwise things can't happen. The other thing is the concept of public value. We've changed and we've made a conscious effort of changing from value for money, because value for money, everyone goes straight to the cheapest price, to a concept of public value, and that's what we should be getting from government procurement. It's about making sure that the public benefits, that's who we work for, whether they be ratepayers or taxpayers or the like. So try and remember that. Public value, it actually does resonate for a lot of people, and people can understand it a lot more than they can total cost of ownership of value for money. That's about it for me. I'm happy to take questions at the end after you've used up all your good time questioning these 2 good speakers. I'm sure that they're going to wow you, and you're just going to be so excited you probably won't even think about the lunch. I'll leave it to you guys.
Thanks, John. Tēnā koutou, ko Tara McMillan aho. E mahi anō aho mō Whakatahi, tēnā koutou. Warm greetings. Really great to have you here. I have the privilege of leading the procurement team at the New Zealand Transport Agency. I am based here in Auckland, although I spend a bit of time here in Wellington, I must admit. But look, any opportunity for us to actually connect as a procurement profession, we're really keen to really foster those networks. So I've got the privilege today of fronting for a number of government agencies that came together last year to really start and to flesh out our journey around broader outcomes. And it started off very much in the context of social procurement. And in the lead up to thinking about some of the messaging today and really focusing on broader outcomes, I'll just tell you a very quick story. I was down in Wellington yesterday, and I had stayed the night before, so Monday night I stayed overnight in Wellington. And I've got an 8-year-old daughter, and I was ringing her to say goodnight, and she just happened to say in a conversation, just out of the blue, "Mum, what do you do for a job?" Yeah, the $1 million question. My mother doesn't even know what procurement is and what I do, so bear with me. So I stopped the back of really thinking about broader outcomes and this amazing legacy that we have the potential in our role to leave. And I was explaining to her, and I thought I was doing this amazing sell job on procurement as a profession. And we got to the end of this wonderful conversation with her, and I paused, and then I said to her the $1 million question, "Madison, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And she said, "An archaeologist." Yeah, so I've got a bit more work to do in terms of my sell job. So look, I'm here to share with you. You're actually getting a sneak preview around the broader outcomes framework. It's due to be published any day now. It's been a culmination of a lot of work across a number of government agencies. And we didn't want to miss the opportunity to share with you kind of a little bit of a look under the hood of what makes it up, but in its broader sense, what it's actually there to try and achieve. And just get this working. There we go. So in terms of broader outcomes, so if we start our journey, it was the back end of last year that the government really started to signal this opportunity around leveraging our buying power across the public sector to achieve greater outcomes. And when you think about the numbers, I mean, collectively across New Zealand, the public sector, we're spending in excess of $40 billion a year. And if there's not some opportunity to leverage, more opportunities around outcomes, social outcomes, economic outcomes, cultural outcomes, environmental outcomes, then we've got a massive opportunity there. So fast forward through to the 1st of October, and a whole lot of the discussions with Cabinet and reset of some policy settings, the new government procurement rules came into effect and really started to tackle this concept of public value. And for us, it's a mindset shift. We know that we have to chase down those core contract responsibilities. We have to consider the price and quality, but now we've been given an opportunity to dive deeper and to really look at opportunities for the driving and the pursuit of secondary benefits. So it's given us a license to operate. I believe, as a procurement professional, that there is no bigger opportunity, I would even argue across the globe, than here in New Zealand, in procurement and in the public sector. We have the opportunity to leave quite a significant legacy with the great work that we already do and building on that, and an opportunity to really influence New Zealanders' everyday lives. And that's a pretty exciting place to be. We're trying to build more capacity and capability across procurement in New Zealand. We know across the public sector we've got procurement people that feel a little bit isolated, that sit in councils further on down the country, some of the smaller councils. I've had the privilege of connecting with a lot of those, and I think the more that we can do to bring our profession together and to build off the back of broader outcomes, the better. So broader outcomes, what does it mean in the procurement sense? Well, in all honesty, just to bring out the elephant in the room, it is a bit daunting. When you first look at it, when you first look at what's been asked for us to achieve and to chase down, it can be seen as a little bit complex. We've got these murmurings around reporting that we're going to have to start submitting more information. We're going to have to work alongside suppliers to do things in a different way, and change can be hard. But putting that aside for a minute, I think it absolutely presents an opportunity for us, and an opportunity for two reasons. Firstly, it's an opportunity to leave an even greater legacy than what we already do. We are the custodians of the public purse, so by default, our day-to-day procurement activities absolutely drive value. But this new mandate around broader outcomes and chasing down secondary benefits allows us to leave an even greater legacy. And then secondly, this is an opportunity for us to connect. So broader outcomes is something that transcends all of us. It transcends local and central government. It transcends different industries. We're sitting in a transport system, and we deliver, maintain, operate, build the transport system. Do we have a lot in common with inland revenue, besides having to pay our taxes? We do via broader outcomes, and we've been working alongside them in recent months, purely around bringing to life or just demystifying broader outcomes and what that means. So what it does is it starts to bringing us together and allows for a different conversation to what we've historically had. So the journey that we've been on is quite an extensive one. So last year we started to peel back the onion layers around social procurement, and the Transport Agency, if you were to step back, and we're really considering what it meant for us and what space we were going to play in. The number one outtake of that was we saw there was a great opportunity for us to actually partner across our sister agencies. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Brett Rigdon, who initially stood up an initial working group across agencies to start the conversation around social procurement, which then dovetailed beautifully into broader outcomes. And also I want to acknowledge Alice Bray, that has her arms wrapped around this, is really bringing it to life within the Transport Agency. But also I want to acknowledge those that stood up on that initial working group. And those were Housing New Zealand, New Zealand Government Procurement, Ministry of Education, Inland Revenue, we had Corrections, Ministry of Social Development, and then we're supported by a myriad of other parties that really helped us shape our thinking. We also had the help of ArcBlue. So ArcBlue brought to the table as our supply partner, our consultant, some good knowledge of what's been happening in Australia. And they had some fantastic lessons about what they did really well and some opportunities for us to do things a little bit differently and learn from maybe some of the little trip-ups that they had along the way. So the back end of last year, this group came together, and initially it was about a conversation about demystifying what social procurement was all about. And what we found was everyone had a slightly different language, different terms and terminologies, different ideas around approaches. So it was really valuable, all of us to come together to start to break that down and then build it back up again. So long story short, the output of that is the production of the framework for delivering broader outcomes. Now, this is a document, it's not a policy document, I want to stress that, but what it does is it complements the broader outcome policy settings, the government procurement rules, and it's another tool in the toolkit to be able to enable the implementation of broader outcomes. The beauty about the broader outcomes framework is it is flexible, so it can be tailored. It doesn't matter what you're involved in, what kind of procurement, what your agency or your government organisation is here to deliver. It can be adapted to fit with your strategic priorities, but bringing it back to the core around the key focus areas of what we're trying to achieve for the greater good of New Zealand. So I'm going to spend a bit of time actually working through the different elements of the framework. I want to stress again, I've got the privilege of standing in front of you and presenting this, but this has been the collective work across a number of agencies with great support from New Zealand Government Procurement and NBIE. So the framework in a nutshell is split into 4 sections. So its highest level, it has a bit of an introduction, provides a bit of context, really calls out what we mean by public value and calls out the priority areas around broader outcomes. And then it's split into three key sections. The first section is around the framework, so really the guts of why we need a framework and what we're trying to achieve from the framework. The second piece here, which is what everyone really wants to get into, is the detail where the rubber hits the road. So how do we go about implementing broader outcomes? And then finally, just a nice to have section at the end around some additional reference material to help guide you, give you a couple of little case studies around some of the great work that's already happened, and that's an area we want to continue to expand on and build out. Now this framework is not meant to be cast in stone. This is not something we produce, stick in the drawer, leave it. We want to be able to bring it to life, and it will evolve over time. It will evolve as our thinking changes and it adapts as we learn lessons. It will evolve, and we want it to ultimately end up being a bit of a dynamic document, or it's something that's sitting on a portal or a system that everyone can interact with. So there's still more to come. So in terms of the introductory section, so this really is about anchoring the framework back to what we're here to achieve. So what is government's direction? What are the priorities we're focusing on? When John spoke before about public value, it's a mindset shift. So this is shifting away from, yes, we know price is important, quality is important, but what more can we be doing? There's a huge amount of spend that's going out into the market every single day. What more value can we get out of that money that we're spending? Now, what I think the government's done a fantastic job of doing, and Cabinet endorsing this direction, is instead of us taking this scattergun approach and trying to boil the ocean, what they've done is they've narrowed our view down into 4 very specific priority areas, and we are required to all collectively get behind these priority areas so that we can make a big difference. And those 4 priority areas are there. So this was really the crux of the broader outcomes framework. Whilst the framework does allow us to go and pursue other outcomes that may make sense to some of your different organisations, we cannot lose sight of what we're required to do, and that's tracking these down. So the second part of the framework is around the actual purpose of the framework and why we believe we need it. Now the framework is in place to help demystify ultimately what we mean by social procurement, broader outcomes. It acknowledges that it isn't simply a reporting exercise. So yes, we know we're going to be working over these next 6 months to get ourselves ready to start to submit really good reporting information from around July next year is the early signal. And we've got this window of opportunity to get ourselves organised. The success of this is around creating an ecosystem within New Zealand. It's made up of a number of connected parts that all need to come together for us to chase down outcomes that leave a very enduring and sustainable outcome for New Zealanders. We don't want to be short-sighted about this, we want to develop the long-term game. And I think that's what we can do differently to Australia. Now, what it also does is identify 7 key objectives, and it goes into detail around those 7 key objectives. Those 7 key objectives in the framework map directly to the priority broader outcomes areas. And what they do is they open up a little bit more around the context for those objectives and sets a little bit of an idea about what we want to try and achieve within the framework. And I'll give you an example one. So if we take targeted opportunities for employment. So we know, and if you go into the framework, there's a bit of information in there. We know that there are population groups within New Zealand that, for whatever reason, there are barriers to entry to employment opportunities. Now, when you start to look at those population groups and you look at the percentage of unemployment within those groups, they are significantly out of whack with New Zealand's standard rates. So New Zealand's standard unemployment rate sits at just over 4%. We have Māori and Pacifica. Unemployment rates there are just over 8%. We've got youth unemployment sitting at over 14%. So when you start to look at those numbers, something's not quite right. So what can we do differently going forward to start to close some of those gaps? Because at the end of the day, if we've got someone out there that's unemployed, that's a member of our community, and we all have an obligation. Now, one of the ones in that that's dear to my heart is I look at, being a woman in construction, I look at the rates of, say, let's take women in the workforce. And there's something like 46% of women that make up our workforce across New Zealand. Then when you look at construction, that number is 15%. And yet, in skills and workforce, we have a skills shortage in construction. So we start to look at these problems that we've got in different areas of our community and what we can do to kind of bring those problems together and solve them collectively. And so that's the opportunities that we can start to open up with incentivising suppliers and working out contracts in a different way. So part B, this is a great section. This is where it gets real. So in this section here, it really starts to give you some tactical tools that you can use throughout your procurement processes. So I'll share a little bit about the Transport Agency's experience with this and how we've been approaching it. So I think, number one, you've got to make sure that you can map the broader outcomes and what you're trying to pursue back to your organisations. It has to be aligned. I mean, for us in the transport sector, it makes absolute sense that we're going to chase down secondary benefits associated with the construction workforce. That's our game. That's where we play in terms of our near fully outsourced model. So that makes sense for us. So we've got to think about where you as an agency and organisation is going and seeing which of these broader outcomes make sense for your organisation, and that needs to be done at the highest level in your strategy. So the Transport Agency, we have an enterprise procurement strategy, and we've called out in that strategy how we're going to approach broader outcomes, and it's going to be a mandatory consideration. That then informs our actual procurement strategy. So when we start to look at our category strategies and our specific activity strategies, broader outcomes is a key consideration that comes into that. And then it's a matter of just rolling it forward. So when you think about our procurement plans, we've got generally a standard template that everyone will start to work off, and they'll create it. We'll just make sure that we've got the right headings and the right approaches embedded in those templates. So there's some really quick wins, some really simple smarts that we can do to make sure we're starting to consider broader outcomes at the front end. Do we have all the answers about exactly what levers we're going to pull? No, but we're making sure that we learn and we continue to develop it as we go in a bit more of a fluid environment. I'll just point out in our objectives, so in our enterprise procurement strategy, we have six objectives that talk about the function of procurement. So we know that as procurement professionals, we participate in the procurement lifecycle, but there are other people across our organisations that also touch procurement. So we have to think about the ecosystem of procurement and the full lifecycle. In our 6 strategic objectives, it's number 4 that says we will actively pursue broader outcomes. So at the highest level, we are calling it out and making sure that it is front of mind. In the broader outcomes framework, we talk about sourcing, and a couple of points in sourcing. It's around, a lot of this is around educating our suppliers. It's really about spending time with them and helping them to demystify what we mean by broader outcomes and secondary benefits. Our suppliers want to do business with us. Other suppliers that aren't already doing business with us want the opportunity to do business with us. So our ability to help them understand what we value and how we're going to go about valuing it will help them to do business with us moving forward. So sourcing is really important that we take our suppliers and potential future suppliers on that journey with us. Now that's great, we've run a really good process. We've awarded a contract, we're into receiving the services or the goods. It's really important that we get this bit right. Now, managers benefits realisation, making sure that what we're looking to achieve we get out of our contracts and our relationships with our suppliers. But it's not just that, it's about the lessons that we can learn. And this is the area where we need to do more, I feel. So where we get it right, absolutely, shout it from the hilltops. We should be sharing really good examples and case studies of where things have gone well through our procurement processes. But similarly, and something that we don't do enough of is when we don't get it quite right, is actually sharing that. And if anything, that's probably more important because we don't want others to make the same mistakes that we've made. We should be prepared to share that, be a little bit more, bit vulnerable, and really allow us all to strengthen as a result of each other's experiences. Now we touched on measure and reporting, so we do have some actual reporting requirements that are coming through. It is important that we do this. We need to understand what good looks like. We need to understand what's our baseline. What are we working with here? And are the treatments that we're using for our procurement processes actually making a difference? And if they're not, we course correct. But if they are, we do more of that. So I think it's really important that we get behind measuring and reporting. In saying that, we've got to make it easy for ourselves and easy for our suppliers. This can't be a big cumbersome administrative burden. I think it's something we can all work on together about some real smarts around tracking some of that information and sharing it wider. So this is a great section in the framework. When you talk about procurement plans and sourcings, there's actual, and strategies, there's some actual suggested content that you pop into your templates and into your frameworks. That's really a really good start to go, what should I be considering as part of my tool set? So I encourage you to read that when it comes out. And then finally, we have section C. So section C is a bit more of a value add. So it's split into three parts. It picks up a little bit of related legislation, policies, initiatives, and it's got some great links. So a very quick ready reference to be able to go to and links. Lots of links to the New Zealand Government Procurement website, to NBIA. It allows you to just duck in there and find out a little bit more information that's not captured in the framework. We've also got some great case studies. We want more to come in here. This is some evidence of some great work that some government organisations are already doing. And then finally a glossary, so we know it's confusing. It's like another language, but there's a glossary at the end and you get some really neat definitions. And look how happy these people are. Look how happy it is to be looking at a glossary. But I want to come back to this. Look, at the end of the day, yes, we've produced this fantastic document that we love and we're really proud of and we think it's going to add a lot of value. But it's not about a document, it's not about a framework, it's what we wrap around it. It's the momentum that we can build off the back of it. When we went through the process of working cross-agency to help co-create this document, the value that we got out of it, because it opened up conversations, and those conversations went further afield than just the working group. We had some fantastic conversations with AT, and we continue to have those. Auckland Council, the Southern Initiative, wow, they're doing some amazing stuff. So what it does is it starts a conversation and starts a bit of momentum. We've got a long way to go. We're only at the start of our journey. But the great thing is most of New Zealand public sector, we're at the start of this journey. So if we can all move forward at kind of the same rate, learn off each other, share our stories, then we can really make a significant difference. And speaking about stories, it's a great segue into Jazz. Sorry, just before Jazz comes up, I think Auckland Council, Auckland Council have been, relatively ahead of the curve with this, with their thinking around sustainable outcomes. And something that Auckland Council and the CCOs, with respect to Auckland Council, have done is continue to give up their time and energy to share the amazing stories. So we're lucky to have Jazz here to share some of the stories.
Oh, thanks. I would love to take credit for that quote, but it's actually not me. So whoever wrote it,
Oh, that was
fantastic.
me.
Oh.
Now 11 o'clock last night, should we got
But that's brilliant. That's actually, in order to bring something like policies or frameworks to life, because otherwise, as Tara was just saying, they're just documents. You really need to be able to share stories and learnings with each other. Because that's how we learn, is we learn from mistakes and we learn from trying. So if we don't try, we'll never know what success looks like. And failing is still success, because if we try something that doesn't work, we'll learn and we'll do something different. And if we share those stories with each other, we'll get much better at actually targeting and achieving some of those real outcomes. I couldn't have done any more splendid job than you did, Tara, in sort of explaining how it's all come about. Because although we've been on slightly different journeys, so the Auckland Council whānau, including Auckland Transport and our other CCOs, has been on a slightly different trajectory, but now we're really coming across an intersection where across New Zealand government procurement, including local government, we're really talking about the same thing. Sometimes you might see some differences in language, but it is actually talking about exactly the same thing, even down to the outcomes, with the objectives and then the priority outcomes. What we're focused on is very, very similar. So explaining our context in terms of the Auckland Council group and whānau, we're an eligible agency in respect to New Zealand government procurement and the rules, but we really want to show solidarity in the sector, and that we really work together with each other. And we were talking yesterday down in Wellington about the system, the procurement system. And system leadership is really about how do we drive step changes in the way procurement's perceived in the wider community. Because as Tara said, it's really difficult to explain procurement to non-procurement people. And if we can do one thing really well out of something as inspirational as broader outcomes and the outcomes that we achieve in the community, that will help us tell our story better. Oh, am I going too far? Can I just pick up on a point that John made right at the beginning? The authorising environment. So our journey has actually been around changing the way our board members, our elected members, our councillors understand the value or the public value that's associated with procurement. Because the rhetoric that you used to hear on the electoral hustings, and occasionally you hear from central government politicians as well, is around cost and cost drivers, and oh, that's really wasteful, or they're really crap at procurement because there was a cost layout or something like that. That's not really helpful to the outcomes that we try to achieve in what we're doing. Because it's really about partnering, making sure we ask the right question, so we plan well, what are we trying to achieve? And then when we go to market, ask the right question and have the right supply partners to help us deliver on those outcomes. And part of that is making our governors and our executives understand that outcomes is not just about the money part. Outcomes is actually delivering. Often in government procurement, it's not actually the money bit or the contracting bit, the spending bit. It's what you can show at the end of it, what the community sees. So is it the new Waterview Tunnel, which suddenly has made most people's travelling time so much less? It's fantastic. But people don't see that while they're in the midst of their procurement activity, which just seems like endless rounds of negotiation, contracting, specifications and all that sort of stuff. But we need to get better at telling stories about what we've delivered to our community, how it's made a difference to their lives. We spent a lot of time with councillors and board members getting them to understand, and I know that Andy and his team and Dave, they've been actually right in the midst of this activity, and as Tara said, that's where the examples are coming from, that's where the stories in the community are building from. And we need to make sure that that becomes the norm. Understanding those outcomes and those stories becomes the norm in terms of what procurement delivers. So it's not always just about the bottom line, it's actually about what we're delivering in our community. Funnily enough, in Auckland Council, I come from a finance workshop with our elected members. Some of them are new into council this term. It's actually talking about delivery. So we promise that we do some things to our community, and we need to keep those promises and actually deliver. And getting better at procurement helps us deliver against those. But back to some of the actual activity that we're involved in. Sorry guys, if you want to, Auckland Transport, I'm pointing at you guys, you can pop up with your stories a bit later on, but I'll just do some Auckland Council stories. And a really recent one around putting an expectation or one of our outcomes into practice is a project that we were involved with, and Paul, who's in our team, who's here, was leading, is for Panuku, and it's around a small subdivision project that they were going to lead. So, this is what was involved in terms of construction infrastructure, etc. Contract value was 1.3 million. Procurement approach was close tender with a weighted attribute. So, that's the simple sort of procurement planning and sourcing approach. What we did differently, this was a requirement. Those of you who can't see, it's talking about supplier diversity, and it's saying that the tenderer shall provide their approach to deliver supplier diversity in their supply chain. So that's looking not just at the prime, but looking at their subcontractors, and we're asking that they ensure 15% of their supply chain value is spent with Māori and Pacific enterprises. And how do we know that that's been done? It's because those Māori and Pacific enterprises, we've specified that they're registered with He Waka Okinawa. So what did that result in? The award went to Higgins. And what did Higgins do? They've engaged APL Civil Construction Limited. They're registered with He Waka Okinawa. So we know that they're a Māori Pacific enterprise. The tenderer, so Higgins, specifically approached the company through He Waka Okinawa. For those of you who don't know He Waka Okinawa, it's currently a subset of the Southern Initiative, and they work with Māori and Pacifica businesses, particularly in South Auckland, get them registered in their system, and actually talk to them about getting tender ready and getting business ready for council projects, but not just council projects, government projects in general. APL Civil will start on site in January 2020. And not just 15%, so they didn't aim for a low target. It's going to be about 25% of the contract spend is going to be with APL Civil across that. Some of the other examples, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to read from my notes. Waiuku Trails project. So this was a pilot project down in Waiuku, which, if you know Auckland, is down in South Auckland, particularly in Franklin, is for our community facilities teams to get involved with, or get local community involvement in some of the projects, because our councils are quite interested, our elected members, should I say, are very interested in making sure that local communities and local businesses get involved in some of our bigger council project spend areas. So what do? They identified a section of the program, so the trails, the building, pathways, etc., in and around the Waiuku area, that could be delivered using local suppliers. So 13 local suppliers were involved in the project. We had a local community participating in volunteer work, doing environmental work in there like planting, etc. And the project enabled access to significant or areas of significance for iwi. One of the key things that was undertaken was in order to make sure that health and safety issues were prioritised and didn't become problematic, where you've got local suppliers who are not quite ready for council health and safety pre-qualification, is that one of our suppliers, AIM, took them under their wing and made sure they were ready. Court collections, it's a great story. So Auckland Council buys loads of books for our libraries. We also buy from suppliers who then donate books to other parts of New Zealand and also to places like Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and and here in my notes says Northern Territory. I know that Australia is not generally underprivileged, but they also donate to other charities as well. So that's a really good story. I mean, we're privileged in Auckland because we have a big section of our community that loves our libraries. And our elected members love our libraries, so we put a lot of money into it. You go to any library and you can access anything. It's fantastic. But some communities aren't as well. And so this is a way of giving back. Multi-cloud. ICT in general is not a place where you see what we would normally traditionally say the mining Pacifica businesses being involved. But this is a big project around our data centres, so where our big data gets stored, how it gets stored. And part of the real value that came out of this is our backup implementation vendor is actually a Māori-owned business with a really strong commitment to sustainability. And they're a really, really good business. They are growing. They are growing on the back of the activity that they're not just doing with us, but across the wider ICT community. Botanical Garden Path. I'm not sure if you can see out the window, but in the council headquarters at 135 Albert Street, we had a whole bunch of marble cladding. One of those panels fell off. Health and safety risk was going to replace all of that. But it was really good cladding, most of it. So what do we do when we've taken it all off a building as big as a 30-story tower? Is part of it got used in the garden paths that we're building at Auckland Botanical Gardens. And so it was used to replace the mosaic on the stone walls, and it avoided some of that material going to landfill. And the bonus of that was almost $400,000 worth of cost avoidance. The Streamworks, Tai Awatea Streamworks. Great parts of what came out of here is we partnered with the Mātea Trust, where there was felling of trees, etc., that happened on site. They donated 4 truckloads of the trees from the site to the Mātea Trust to on-sell as firewood to help their trust operate, to give them some funds to operate. And the Mātea Trust is a registered charity which was set up to provide residential service and support for people with intellectual disabilities to enable them to integrate into the community. The contractor that was also involved on site has confirmed that they're now paying all their staff a living wage, and this was achieved 6 months ahead of their earlier goal of 1 July. The one that's not on there is the work that our Healthy Waters team does with the Ministry of Social Development, and it's called Ngā Puna Pukinga, so Skills for Industry. So it helps recruit or encourage the recruitment of people who are on the MSD job seeker list and embed them into career pathways with constructors who build and maintain the Healthy Waters infrastructure. So the pilot currently has a target to place 60 learners into infrastructure-based employment by June 2020. There's 15 that have been employed so far, with four more in the pipeline. And they target groups like youth, so youth 18 youth 18 to 24, Māori, Pacifica, and needs, so not in education, employment or training. So some of the successful placements, and if any of you heard the podcast on is it Radio New Zealand? Or, yeah, that's right. One of those is City Care, who is a council supplier, employed a young man who's on the autism spectrum and was finding trouble keeping a role. They've really taken him under their wing and provided the pastoral care to ensure that he's really successful in his role. We've got CB contractors who are going to place 2 unemployed Ngāti Whātua or Araki descendants into the work on the Okahu Bay stormwater project. And so that project's got cultural significance to Ngāti Whātua or Araki because that's in their road. And it gives them a chance to work within their own area and to deliver something that will have large amounts of significance for their iwi in terms of cleaning up their waterways. And the last one is Te Whāngai Trust has employed 2 people that have been released from prison. One person who had been locked up for 30 years and was previously unable to get employment. And those are just some of the really nice stories that are coming out of this, just because we're encouraging people to think differently when they're going out, looking at procurement activity, and in that really early stage around planning. You know, so what Tara was talking about. When you're planning and you think about these outcomes, it actually makes a really big difference because you can do it without thinking about cost, and cost you can incorporate into the overall outcomes of the project. Did I do it? Did I push the button?
Okay. Yes.
So we're going to play you a quick little video as well.
And so what we've been able to do is marry up the 2 main contractor, the company called Corball, and Greenway, the demolition contractor, with an organisation called Trowel, and working in partnership with a community group, Earth Action, to allow them to receive the material in a safe way and distribute it out amongst the community where we know that there is so much need for the material.
99% of our stuff is recycled, upcycled stuff. Planters, all from pellet wood. We do things from bathtubs to tables made out of old washing machine drums, and just whatever we can source and save from going to land waste, we use.
This is great. I went yesterday, Joe and I went over there, we tagged all the stuff we wanted. They said they'll deliver it today at 10 o'clock or 10:30, and they're here.
Around about 40% of all waste to landfill is coming from construction and demolition. But at the same time, we also know there's a big thirst and a big desire and a need to get these sorts of materials out to the community.
You can see the roof of it, the ceiling is all rotten. It started leaking there. We're trying to replace all the doors and the roof, guttering, everything in there.
We don't
have to make it fancy, boy.
It's too flash, man.
Too flash, man.
From an environmental point of view, it's excellent news because we have considerably less waste that's going to landfill.
There's trainees on the site who are given the base requirement.
Look, it's just one small example. You know, one of the outcomes we're looking for is around environmental outcomes, reducing waste, and how do I say it? So it may be a little bit harder in the planning, may involve a little bit more thinking, a little bit more influencing and convincing your stakeholders, but man, it's rewarding. When you see that sort of stuff around community groups that can't afford things, being allowed to recycle and upcycle as well. It's fantastic. So look, that's my plea to you, is it might be a little bit harder, it might take a little bit more time, but think of the rewards, think of the outcome, think of the difference it makes in our community. And that's why broader outcomes and sustainable and social outcomes are just so important to the work we do, and we'll be able to tell these stories. I'm going to hand over to Tara.
Let's stay up there, Jazz, because we're going to have an opportunity for some questions now. And just to tie that together, just something for you to think about is, I love this quote, it's actually in the front end of our framework. And it's Ngā te roro, Ngāku te roro, ka ora, ai te iwi. And what it means is, your food basket is my food. So together with your food basket and my food basket, the people will prosper. And I think that really brings your point home. So we now have the ability to answer any questions, and I know there are some other experts out here that are involved in a lot of great work, so we'll open that up, and John's available as well to hear anything more about what's happening in BIE or New Zealand Government Procurement. Over to you.
So what do you see as your biggest challenges in terms of implementing?
Yeah, so there's a real influencing role here, and you know, look, I take the transport agency. We've got a lot going on. We've got some big ticket items that we're trying to deliver, and broader outcomes is really important. So it's making sure that we get that great share of voice for broader outcomes and an involved at the front end. Jazz touched before about, for us to actually truly chase down the opportunities, it all comes down to the planning. There's no point in us as procurement professionals, you know, getting it all at the sourcing stage and we're just doing running the transactional and procurement process. We need to be thinking strategically through that planning cycle at the front end to ultimately be able to influence the sourcing process and ultimately the delivery of our activities. So I think that's probably number one for me, is that thinking up front.
And just building on that, is that thinking up front and influencing should all be able to convince your stakeholders that there's no additional risk associated with trying to get these additional outcomes. It's actually, we can do it and still deliver what you need to be delivered in a meaningful way, and you know, it doesn't actually have to impact the deliverable.
Jazz had some really great examples there, that it doesn't need to be something that's going to kind of boil the ocean, transform the world. It can be something really small, as in, you know, some materials coming off one site getting redirected to another project or another indirect opportunity. So we just got to think, we just got to reframe ourselves to think a little bit broader, a little bit differently, and not be boxed in by prescriptive processes that we may have run in the past.
What steps are NZTA and probably broader government agencies doing to bring suppliers on the journey before you start putting them into RFPs or upskill them?
So I think we tend to use the lever of market sounding very heavily. We also have quite a number of forums where we're closely connected with our industry. So we are heavily reliant on the construction sector for the design and the build of our projects, and not only that, all the maintenance of our network. So it is critically important that suppliers are a big part of that journey. We see them as partners. A change to us means a change to our suppliers. We also know that our industry and our suppliers, they're incredibly receptive and very adaptable. They just want to know what we value and they'll respond and kind of get in behind. So for the transport agency, we run quarterly industry liaison meetings. So we have our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers that come in for a strategic conversation. We've been socialising broader outcomes, you know, for the last 7-8 months in particular. They have seen some early drafts of this framework as well, so they're able to start to think about what it means to their home organisations. Next week, we're putting a survey out to all of our suppliers, and we're simply asking, based on these priority areas, we want to build a bit of an inventory of the great stuff they've already got going on, because the more we talk to our suppliers, the more we actually realise that they've already got a lot of this stuff going on. We're just not getting visibility of it. So we want to know, what have you got going on that relates back to broader outcomes, and give us an idea of what impact that is then delivering. And that will then allow us to think about what's the best mechanism for getting some reporting and information back that we can then pass on and share broader.
I see a copy of this.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah.
Perhaps I can talk to that a little bit as well, in that you know, we're at MB and NZGPP, we're doing quite a bit of work around trying to get out the message to suppliers in terms of what we're trying to achieve by this and how we're going about it. But if you look at it, this is actually a real good opportunity, particularly around those first couple of outcomes, so increasing access to New Zealand business and the trade skills area, where New Zealand businesses actually get the chance to say and contribute in terms of weightings and things like that to tenders about the good stuff that they're doing now. If I look at trade skills as an example, there's a lot of businesses out there that have been actively investing in trade skills for, you know, workers that they look after, and they're getting no recognition from it, because you get the labour hire companies that come in and just pay, you know, hammer hands, you know, good money, and they don't invest in them at all. So in a way, this is actually levelling the playing field for those that are doing the right thing. For New Zealand businesses, we've got so many businesses that are out actually doing the right thing and helping in communities and things like that. This is a chance for them to actually get that recognised. So there's a lot of suppliers out there that are just looking for the opportunity to say, well, now I get a chance to say this is what I'm doing, and this will hopefully shape some of the other businesses that are there as well. It turns out if you don't start something, you never finish it. And this is about getting a start in a lot of this stuff. So it can be small things, and don't underestimate what a difference employment can make for an extended family, for one person. So where there's one or two people here and there that are getting some real benefit, or some employment, or some training, or something like that, it has a huge impact and a bit of a snowball that once it starts, it just carries on. So, I think the two presentations today were outstanding. They explain not only what we're doing, but how we're doing it, why we're doing it. But if you can't get enthusiastic and excited about that, then poke someone next to you with something sharp and wake them up, because it really is a chance to make a difference. And procurers now really have an opportunity to make a difference. And I think it's a great thing, huge thing. Any other, we've got about 5 minutes, are there any other questions or anything generally around procurement? Then I get these two experts to answer.
Did you say expert?
From a supplier's perspective, often one of the biggest challenges we face are the narrow procurement windows, particularly if we haven't had a prior relationship with the particular government entity that you may be dealing with. 5 or 6 weeks for, I believe, a quality outcome and bid is restricted and creates all kinds of challenges to do that. What we'd like to see from a supplier's perspective is more engagement at an either ROI or EOI level, perhaps running one-day seminars where all the suppliers come in and we get to ask questions, we get to understand what the value drivers are for the contract, what the particular entity is looking for in the way of service delivery, so that when we actually get to the bid process, if it's 5 or 6 weeks, fine, but at least we're well armed. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you release an RFP and you just get flooded with a million questions. And some of those questions you're not in a position to answer, or you need to go away and do some homework. That can often be smoked out in the earlier stage of the process, so that's something we'd love to see.
Yeah.
I'm sure the market generally would like to see that as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there. In fact, what we see continually across the system is the couple of areas that people or procurers tend not to do well in, and part of it's because of the authorising environment that they're working in. That is some of the planning up front. Quite often it starts too late or doesn't include, what the options are that are available that have been discussed with industry. The other bit's the management at the other end and the measurement of what's actually being achieved. And if we can get both those sorted, you're a long way there. We are looking at mechanisms through changes to GETS that actually allow a lot more information earlier, which doesn't necessarily impact on the window. A tender's got to be open, but at least it gives the market a lot more information earlier around what's happening. So potentially removing the requirement to do the annual procurement plan reporting, but actually having a requirement, a deliverable that people have to load tenders on GETS when they know that they're going to happen in a time frame moving forward. So it can be a little bit more targeted.
Like we see huge value coming from, say, market sounding. That's at the front end of the process before even starting our market activity, to be able to bring any interested suppliers in to give a bit more context, because at the end of the day, when we issue specific documents, you've got words written on a page, it often sometimes can miss the point, and be able to have a conversation and deliver it in a different way and add a bit of context and story around it really can help suppliers. So it's certainly a lever that we will continue to use and try and do more of, because I think that's great feedback. And we're trying to broaden out. We want to make sure that we are removing the barriers to entries for new suppliers, small to medium-sized businesses, really looking at opportunities for where we can provide greater opportunities with our program going forward in the infrastructure side.
Yeah. And then from our perspective, just echoing that, market sounding's getting better at doing supplier workshops, etc., before we put activity out in the market. But also picking up on that whole, look, it has been scary in the past, people have been uncomfortable doing that, but we're moving into a very open and transparent environment. We're publishing our forward work program into the market. We really want to go out there and actually say this is what we're planning on doing, and ask the right questions, so we can shape up the way we think before we take it out to market, and we're not using that 5-6 week window, 4-week window to help shape our thinking. That's just poor planning. So that is an upskilling and an uplifting around our industry in general, or our profession, should I say, not our industry, and getting our people more comfortable with going out and having those conversations without fear of thinking I'm going to give away a secret or something like that. So it's we talked about transparency the other day.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things I spoke about yesterday when we had a group in Wellington, it's not about trying to extend the process or the length of time it takes to tender for everything we do. It's about being targeted for what is the nature of what we're asking industry to actually respond to. If it is something that is highly technical or very complex, then you need a longer period of time more often than not, particularly around big infrastructure or construction projects. But for a lot of other stuff, you actually need a relatively short period of time. In fact, with the increasing or the speeding up of the product life cycle, a lot of this stuff, if you take too long, chances are everyone's moved on before you've actually achieved or delivered any goods. There's an expectation from citizens that things will be happening immediately, almost as soon as they want something, and that's not going to change. And if procurement doesn't keep up and isn't adaptable and flexible, then it becomes irrelevant and people will move around it. So it's about finding new ways of doing it. There's lots of really good pilots around at the moment around different ways of tendering, for example. Rather than making every business come in and write a lengthy RFP, which costs a lot for a small business, because quite often they don't know how to do it, so they have to pay someone to do it. It's about getting them in and just giving a verbal presentation of what their offer is. There's some stuff that you do need them to sign, and maybe some financials and things like that, but the rest of it, let them explain it. There's ways you can do it. You can record things and still just have just as much probity. So it's about making sure it's a horses for courses thing. If more time's needed, make sure it's allowed for in the planning. If it's a shorter time, then let's do it in that time. Hey, we'll probably come to an end in terms of the time frame. Really appreciate particularly our two speakers. Thanks very much for your efforts. I was really impressed from the back, and it enthused me, so I hope it did you as well. As I said at the beginning, we do want to be able to do more of these. If you've got any thoughts on things that you'd actually like us to come and talk to you about, then let us know. Drop us a line or speak to one of these people or whoever. Just get it. Yell from the loudest tree or hill. You've got one tree hill or something. Make sure you let us know, because then we can actually target and make sure what we're coming along with, the things that you actually want to learn about and understand. Make sure you do register for Hikina. A lot of this sort of stuff's going to be there, so it means you're not missing out anyway in terms of some of the stuff that's going on. But hey, thanks for taking the time. Hope you've enjoyed it, and thanks to these speakers.